Good evening, everyone. I'm Brooke Martin, Director of Infrastructure and Operations from Sutherland Shire Council. Thanks for being here tonight. I understand that this is taking time out of your evening and that this is an important issue for you. I want to reassure you that we have heard your feedback so far on this study. We acknowledge all the concerns and questions that have been raised by our residents. We have some key updates to provide for you tonight, and we want to address your questions. I want to acknowledge our councillors who have been listening to many of you, hearing your concerns, and acknowledge those councillors that have joined online. Thank you for being here this evening. Firstly, I will start with an acknowledgement of country. Sutherland Shire Council acknowledges the Dharawal people as the traditional custodians of the land within Sutherland Shire. We value and celebrate Dharawal culture and language and acknowledge Dharawal people's continuing connection to the land, the sea and community. We pay respect to the elders and their families past, present and emerging, and through them to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. At the Monday night council meeting, the Overland Flood Study was discussed with many community members attending or listening in. As a result of the concerns, councillors made some changes. Firstly, we have removed the notations arising from this draft flood study until the flood study is completed and adopted by council. We are also extending the consultation period until the 31st of March 2024 to allow all owners plenty of time to attend a one-on-one session and provide feedback. This is our second information session following on from Tuesday night, and there are one-on-one sessions starting next week with our flood experts. We know these sessions have filled quickly and our team is working hard to organise more sessions. We are committed to ensuring that all affected property owners are able to attend a one-on-one session with a flood expert. We will provide full details of the opportunities to speak with our flooding experts in the coming weeks. Council is also seeking further advice from New South Wales Government on the floodplain process to ensure the work we are doing at Sutherland Shire Council is consistent. And we are engaging a peer review of the study to confirm the technical aspects are in line with New South Wales Government advice. A little bit of housekeeping for tonight's session. Please note that all cameras and microphones are off to allow everyone to hear and view the presentation. We are recording the session and will make it available via our website for those that could not make it tonight. Closed captioning will be available in the transcript on the recording. Our communications and engagement team are collating the questions and feedback through the Q&A feature in the header of this Teams session. These questions will be collated and moderated to streamline our question time, as many of you will have similar questions, no doubt. Thank you for your patience with this. We may not be able to answer all of the questions tonight, so be sure to check our FAQs online for additional questions and answers from tonight. So tonight we have a presentation by Kieran Smith, Senior Engineer from BMT. BMT was successful in the Sutherland Overland Flood Study tender due to their proven track record of delivering flood studies, including detailed modelling of mainstream and overland flooding. BMT has completed more than 50 flood studies and floodplain risk management studies for multiple local New South Wales councils over the past 15 years. Again, I know you will have many questions, so please bear with us as we move through the information session, starting with the big picture, and then we will get to some more of the specifics. Council commenced the Sutherland Overland Flood Study in 2021 to fulfil our responsibility to mitigate flood risk, protect our community and people's property, and to assist with emergency planning. A key part of the flood study process is community engagement, and we are wanting to provide you with as much information as possible so that you can contribute to the study through your feedback.
Thanks very much, Brooke. If somebody could let me know if the slide comes up, please.
Yes, it's showing, Kieran.
Excellent. Thanks, Brooke. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kieran Smith, and I'm here from BMT to present on the draft report for the Sutherland Shire Overland Flood Study. As Brooke just mentioned, BMT were engaged by Sutherland Shire Council to undertake the technical modelling and reporting for the study. Today, I'll provide a roughly 15-minute presentation on the Sutherland Shire Overland Flood Study. The aim of the presentation today is to provide a broad overview of both what is involved in a study and what we've undertaken as part of this study. As per the slide, we'll talk to why the study's been done, what the study area is, how the study was done, the reliability of the modelling, and what is the flood risk in the catchment. In New South Wales, the management of flood-prone land is primarily the responsibility of local councils. The aim of this study is to define the existing flood risk in the catchment and to gain an understanding of how the Sutherland Shire potentially floods in rare and extreme flood events. The study is the third step in the floodplain risk management process. It will be used to inform ongoing land use planning, development control, and flood emergency management. In the future, the study will be used to help mitigate flood risk in the catchment. The study has gone through an extensive review process. It was developed in consultation with Sutherland Shire Council's Technical Working Group and Floodplain Risk Management Advisory Committee, and the study was endorsed and adopted by Council prior to public exhibition. On screen here is an example output from the flood study showing how it can be used to inform flood emergency management. The map shows flood emergency response classifications. These are used to assist Council and the SES with evacuation planning and emergency response in the event of a flood. Because of the steep urbanised nature of the catchment, rainfall is rapidly converted to runoff in very rare events, and the total flood warning time is very short. So this flood study can be used by emergency services to focus efforts towards areas that are likely to require response and assistance in those major events. During heavy rainfall, flooding can occur in two ways. It can occur as mainstream flooding, which is rising water levels in creeks and rivers, which overtop their banks and inundate surrounding land. It can occur as overland flooding or flash flooding, which is stormwater runoff that flows overland towards a waterway. This study is primarily concerned with overland flooding. To clear up any potential misconception, the study does not suggest that floodwater will rise 10 metres or 50 metres or 100 metres above sea level to inundate properties. Overland flooding can occur anywhere in a catchment, including in elevated areas, such as properties located on a hill, because rain falls everywhere, and due to the movement of water from the highest point in a catchment towards areas of lower elevation. While the primary focus of the study is on overland flooding, the study does also identify areas where mainstream flooding occurs, such as creeks and areas in the lower parts of the catchment, which are inundated by the Port Hacking, Georges River, and Woronora River. The study area is shown on screen. It's a very large area. It's approximately 253 square kilometres, and it encompasses the catchment and the urban areas of the Sutherland Shire that drain into the Woronora River, Georges River, and Port Hacking River. The study covers the catchment of those watercourses from the large areas that originate in the heavily vegetated portions of the Royal National Park and Heathcote National Park, and they typically drain from south to north towards the major watercourses. It also includes a majority of the urbanised portion of the Sutherland Shire from Barton Ridge in the west to Cronulla in the east. Flooding in the area has occurred in the past, most notably in 2003 and 2015, and more recently, heavy rainfall in 2020, 2021, and 2022 has resulted in flooding. As you can see, there are some urbanised areas in the northeast of the Shire which aren't covered by the study. That's because Council has already prepared studies for many other areas of the LGA, local government area, including Woolooware, Kurnell, and Gawley Bay. Sutherland Shire has been doing flood studies for over 30 years. The assessment of flooding within the catchment has been undertaken using advanced computational modelling. Computer models are the most common and efficient tools for assessing flood behaviour within a catchment, particularly for an area the size of the Sutherland Shire. Computer models are the default approach utilised in, if not all, a very significant majority of flood studies in New South Wales, in Australia, and across the world. For this study, separate hydrologic and hydraulic models were developed, where the hydrologic model transforms rainfall into runoff, and the hydraulic model simulates the distribution and movement of the runoff. So how did we build the model? A large amount of input data from a wide range of sources goes into the building of flood models. That includes rainfall data that's supplied by the Bureau of Meteorology, which is based on detailed assessment of over 50 rainfall gauges in and surrounding the Sutherland Shire. Ground surface data that's provided by Land and Property Information, LPI, New South Wales, predominantly in urbanised areas. That's in the form of LiDAR or laser survey that was collected in April of 2020. April 2020 is what covers the urbanised portion of the catchment. LiDAR is used to provide a representation of ground surfaces and does pick up on the differences in surface elevations across the catchment. So it does identify if your property is on a hill, it does identify your sloping driveway, and it will identify if you have a tiered backyard. Council stormwater network is also identified. And the different surface types and how water flows over them is also represented. For example, water will flow much more quickly over hard paved surfaces like roads or concrete, but it'll flow much more slowly through the vegetated area to the south. The question around how do we know the model is reliable is one we receive a lot of. As part of this study, the model has been verified against historic flooding. Model verification is the process used to assess a model's performance against observed behaviour for historical events. For this study, verification of the modelling was undertaken by comparing the performance of the model against historical data along the Warrenora River and historical observations of flooding reported to Council. The model was verified against the May 2003, April 2015, February 2020, and March 2021 events, and was found to provide a reliable representation of observed historic flood behaviour. In a broader sense, the study has utilised the best available data, national guidelines, proven software, it's undergone extensive review, and is undertaken by qualified professionals with significant experience in floodplain management. Once the model was verified, it was then used to model design flood behaviour and output design flood results. A range of rainfall scenarios were investigated based on rainfall data obtained from the Bureau of Meteorology. The study output focuses primarily on the 1% annual exceedance probability, or AEP, event, which has a 1% chance of occurring in a given year. The 1% AEP event is used as the general standard for the management of flooding in the Sutherland Shire and in most councils across New South Wales and Australia. A variety of outputs are generated during flood modelling, which include flood depths, flow velocity, and flood hazard, which is the potential danger that floodwater can present to people, vehicles, and buildings. The Overland Flood Study has identified flood-affected areas based on a set of criteria including minimum flood depths, velocity, and extent thresholds. The criteria were selected following extensive analysis and review to define overland flow paths and identify areas that were subject to more significant floodwater depths and hazard, and to exclude areas that were subject to negligible inundation or nuisance flooding. These parameters were used to determine the extent of flood liable land. A significant output of the study is the determination of potential flood control lots. The notation of flood control lots is an output that's required under New South Wales regulation. Flood control lots refer to any lot which is intersected by either the flood planning area or the probable maximum flood. I'll go through both of those in the next two slides. A lot is identified as a flood control lot if flood liable land extends more than 1 metre into the lot boundary. The location on the lot boundary is not relevant to flood tagging. Tagging occurs if the lot boundary is intersected by more than 1 metre. Sorry about that. It's noted that for some properties, flood tagging will indicate the potential for a high level of flood hazard and high level of flood affectation on an existing building. However, for many people, you may have received a preliminary notification because your lot has been tagged at a location that isn't proximate to your house. It could be the bottom of your driveway, it could be your rear setback, it could be adjacent to your boat ramp. If you're part of a strata plan, then you might have received a notice because the whole strata lot is flood affected, even though your particular building isn't affected. If you're part of an apartment complex and you live on a higher floor, you might have received a notification because, again, your strata lot has been tagged, not your property. The notification is based on your lot affectation. As Brooke mentioned, Council has removed the Section 10.7 notifications from properties identified under the draft study until the public exhibition, report finalisation, and peer review of the study has been undertaken. Under New South Wales Government's flood-prone land package, flood-affected areas are notated on Section 10.7 planning certificates. A lot can either be notated as affected by the flood planning level or affected by the probable maximum flood. The flood planning level defines the level below which a council places restriction on development as a means of managing future flood risk. The flood planning area is the extent of the area below the flood planning level. In Sutherland, the flood planning level is defined as the 1% AEP event plus a half metre of freeboard. Freeboard is a factor of safety that's typically used in relation to the setting of minimum floor levels, which includes allowances for uncertainties in the estimates of flood levels, local factors, because this is a catchment-wide study, and wave action due to wind or vehicles. BMT investigated and provided advice and specific detail around the choice of freeboard, including different freeboard options as part of this study. In the end, Council has adopted a half-metre freeboard for the draft study, in line with their existing development control plan and their other flood studies. For reference, a half-metre freeboard is the typical value that's adopted in New South Wales. If a lot is tagged as being below the flood planning level, any development that's proposed within the boundary of the flood planning area will require consideration of flooding, and flood-related development controls will apply. This is the same approach that's used for many environmental factors that development responds to, such as tree canopy, bushfire risk, ecological communities, and topographic features. The notation does not prohibit development, it just indicates water flow as a consideration, and development should be designed to be compatible with flood behaviour. That's to ensure safety for property owners and to avoid increased impacts on other properties. It is noted these controls would predominantly only apply to any works proposed within the flood planning area itself. Development that's outside of the flood planning area and above the flood planning level would not be affected. The probable maximum flood defines the extent of flood-prone land, the floodplain. Consideration of the PMF, or the probable maximum flood, is important when considering issues such as flood emergency management. In July 2021, the New South Wales Department of Planning introduced additional classification which marked all cadastral lots which fell within the extent of the probable maximum flood. If a lot is tagged as being affected by the PMF, a greater consideration of flood risk is required if the development is associated with sensitive, vulnerable, or critical land use. For example, child and aged care, schools, and medical facilities. These additional considerations do not apply to residential development that is not classified as sensitive, vulnerable, or critical land use, or considered to be at a high risk of flooding. Council has made the mapped extents of the Sutherland Shire Overland Flood Study available via Shire Maps, which can be accessed via the Join the Conversation page following the Overland Flood Study Shire Maps. When you open the page, you can search for your particular address in the top right corner here, or over here at the search bar. If I search, for example, for Caringbah Library, and I come down here and click on Layers in the bottom left screen, I will be able to look at the affectation for the property and look at the draft Overland Flood Study output. In this case, I can see that Caringbah Library is partially within the extent of the probable maximum flood. Thank you very much for your time and for listening.
Thank you, Kieran. Just a reminder that you can place questions in the Q&A feature in the header of the Teams session. So the team have collated some questions received so far, and we will start to go through these, and myself and Kieran will try to answer as many of these questions as we can. The first question I've got is, when will final documents be released and the final decision? So final documents will likely be available sometime next year, once the feedback is assessed and the peer review is completed. Another question I have here is, the one-on-one sessions have already booked out. How can I speak to someone? On the join the conversation, there is a wait list button that you can use, and you can register yourself on that wait list, and we will contact you for some more sessions that we're planning to do over the next few weeks. I have a question from Ray. Will you send letters advising that notations have been removed and the date on which they were removed? Yes, we're working on that letter and you should get it shortly. I've got one here for you, Kieran. LiDAR data vertical accuracy of plus or minus 0.3 metres is not a sufficient accuracy level when you are measuring flood levels of 0.15 to 0.25 metres, which I believe is the peak flood depth for many properties as per the design peak flood depth PMF event map. Will a more accurate assessment be completed?
LiDAR data accuracy varies across the catchment. It is relatively well represented in urban areas. It can be slightly less representative in areas with dense vegetation because there is a lot of interference from trees and kind of the leaves impact on the lasers. In regard to accuracy on an individual lot, if you were to have an individual lot surveyed, you would get a slightly different results to that shown by the study, but not necessarily one that was dramatically different. The study is designed to model flood behavior at a catchment-wide scale, and it identifies the major flow paths for that region, for that reason and across the region. In terms of whether there would be updated data put in, we're collecting a lot of information as part of the public exhibition, and we'll provide some feedback to council in that regard. It is unlikely, unless there is a significant amount of additional high level data that's available, that there would be changes to the LiDAR data. That is the best available data we have across the catchment.
Okay, Kieran, another one for you. Is there anything that homeowners can do to their properties in light of this study to prevent our properties from being affected? For example, I have a small pink exposure at the back of my property in the garden. Can I build a concrete barrier to prevent it coming onto my property and then not be flagged as being at risk?
The aim of the study and the tagging process is to identify the extent of flood liable land and then to allow council to be aware of what that extent is, so that if you undertake development in the future, you don't necessarily impede on flood conditions, so that you can't potentially make conditions worse for your neighbour and your neighbour can't make conditions worse for you. And in certain circumstances, if you're at a lower lying property and you want to redevelop, council will have an information that will allow you to build your house to a higher level that will prevent you from getting flooded in those rarer events. In regard to whether a development would change your would change your flood classification if, for example, you were to build a barrier across the flooded extent. No, I wouldn't think so. The aim of the study would actually be to prevent you from doing so, because building a barrier across the flood zone would potentially impact on your neighbour and make their condition worse.
Thanks, Kieran. I have another one for you from Scott. If your land has pink shading on it, are you PMF tagged or PMF affected?
I don't quite understand the difference in that, sorry, but the tagging process indicates that your cadastral lot or your building lot is within the extent of the probable maximum flood. The extent of how much it goes into your lot would give you an indication of where the potential probable maximum flood would impact on your property. But I don't quite understand the difference between affected and tagged, sorry.
Okay, I have another question here. What is the impact on property prices? So house prices vary continuously with changes in the real estate market and are based on a large range of criteria such as location, size and age, and are not under the control of council. Ultimately, it's the market that determines the value. This study does not prevent the sale or purchase of property. Also have a question, what is the impact on insurance? The Insurance Council of Australia indicated that insurers already have extensive data on flood risk that is priced into premiums. Insurers use data from a variety of sources, including their own broad-scale studies and flood information generated as part of a floodplain risk management study and plan. They use this data to define the potential risk of flooding and to price insurance premiums accordingly. Insurance companies are not all the same. They can assess risk in different ways, and they may classify flooding in different ways. We recommend you talk to your insurance company about how they classify flooding and stormwater and how this relates to your insurance premiums. Okay. I've got a question here about the options for disagreeing with the ruling in the study. So at the moment, we're offering the discussions to talk to the flood team and have that discussion one-on-one and also put that in writing, and we'll review that as part of the feedback. I have a question from Simon. Will council look at the stormwater system in line with this survey? So yeah, there's several ways that we will be using this study in terms of council's drainage system. We will be looking at mitigation options on how we can improve or upgrade the system. We will also be looking at the locations and maintenance of our hotspots as part of that study. Currently, we do proactive maintenance of our assets, and we do also do respond to requests from residents. If you have concerns about your drain being blocked, we can go and have a look at that for you. We also do a program of CCTV to have a look down our pipes, to have a look at whether any maintenance is required there. And you can contact us through our website if you have any concerns about the way that the drainage system might be working. One for you, Kieran. Overland flood versus rising flood.
So I assume by rising flood, they mean mainstream flooding. So mainstream flooding is water that breaks the banks of a watercourse, either a creek or a river, and then rises to flood the banks and the surrounding areas themselves. Overland flooding refers to, or flash flooding refers to overland flow that it runs from high points in a catchment towards low points as a result of heavy or excess rainfall that exceeds the capacity of the drainage system and then flows over the surface towards the low points of the catchment. This study is predominantly concerned with overland flow flooding, but there are aspects of rising flooding, I suppose, if you want to call it that, but mainstream flooding in some of the creeks and in the lower reaches of the catchment along the Port Hacking, the Warrenora River and the Georges River.
Another one for you, Kieran. Why has no one visited my property, and how can the study be accurate then?
The study is a catchment-wide scale study, so it is a very large catchment, it's 253 kilometres squared. Predominantly, the purpose of the study is to identify flood risk across the Sutherland Shire LGA. One of the outputs is the identification of flood liable land, which is perhaps why you're interested in and question about your specific property. Study verification has been undertaken to demonstrate that the study represents existing flood conditions, so it has represented historical flood conditions for a variety of events and to ensure the model accuracy. In regard to your specific property, I would encourage you to make a submission outlining potentially why you think the study is not factoring for certain local conditions at your property, and that will be assessed as part of the public exhibition period.
Okay, thanks, Kieran. Got a question. Will the report be made easier to understand as mentioned at council on Monday night? Yes, we will make some new maps that will simplify the information and make it clearer for people to understand, particularly showing the risk and depth of water flowing on properties. Why is my property identified as flood affected when I've not seen a flood occur? So flood notations are based on rare and extreme storm events, such as the 1% annual exceedance probability and the probable maximum flood. Statistically, over the course of 70 years, there's about 50% chance of a 1% AEP event occurring. In 2022, Sydney received above average total rainfall. The Bureau of Meteorology, I can't say that word, BOM, rainfall gauge at Lucas Heights recorded rainfall well in excess of the average monthly amounts in March and July. Overland flooding in the study area can be described as flash flooding. That is, it can occur and be gone within relatively short times, say within a couple of hours. Rainfall recorded at Sydney Water's Menai gauge indicates a maximum intensity for rain durations less than 1 hour of between 5% and 2% AEP on 22nd of Feb 22. That is an average of between 1 in 20 and 1 in 50 year storm. The storm events experienced in 2022 were less than a 1% AEP or a 1 in 100 year event. It's also noted that rainfall can be highly variable across the Shire. For example, storm events at Menai can be different to rainfall patterns in Caringbah. Why was my property identified as flood affected, but it's high above the road and nearby houses are lower, but were not identified? So there are many variables that occur at individual locations. So it is difficult to answer about a particular property in this meeting. It may be that the flooding occurs at the front or the rear of your property. And so we recommend you meet with our flood engineers to discuss the specifics of your property, and additional sessions are being organised now to allow residents to have one-on-one meetings with our flood team. Kieran, we might circle back to you about to explain the PMF a little bit more.
Sorry, I'll mute them. The probable maximum flood is an estimate of the worst case flood that can conceivably occur at any particular location. It has a recurrence interval that is well in excess of a 100-year period, or the 1%. It's got a recurrence interval that is at least a 10,000-year event, if not above. In regard to why we assess an event so large when that type of event certainly has never happened in the Sutherland Shire in living memory, and has only happened, or something similar has only happened in a few locations in Australia in recorded history, it's because we need to look at the absolute worst case scenario when we're planning for emergency management and when we're planning on where we can put critical and vulnerable development. That is why that it was brought in as part of the 2021 Department of Planning change, and that's why flood tagging for proper maximum flood properties is notated. It's about ensuring that critical and vulnerable development and emergency services are able to know the absolute worst case scenario flooding for future planning and future development.
Got a question here. Can council better maintain their drainage system to reduce flooding? So council's stormwater drainage network comprises of stormwater pits, pipes and open channels, and drainage is installed to handle frequent flood events, but is not designed to handle the volume of water in major events. In a major storm event, runoff will flow overland, such as across roads and through properties, as the capacity of pipes is exceeded. Even when pipes are clear and flowing, storm runoff will flow overland in the larger events. In regards to maintenance, council is responsible for maintaining its drainage assets, and we proactively look for and respond to requests from residents about blocked drainage systems or overgrown channels to clear them of debris. Again, if you have noticed or are concerned about a particular location, please let us know and contact us through our phone or email, or submitting an online request, and we'll come out and have a look at it. Question, why has 500mm freeboard been applied to this study? Why not use 300mm like other councils and in other studies? So freeboard has been raised by community, and it is something we will be reviewing during and following the exhibition period. It can be variable, and there are different freeboards which can be considered. The 1/2 metre freeboard was adopted in line with council's current development control plan. The freeboard to be adopted is something that we are going to be looking at. How deep does the water moving overland on a property have to be such that it is considered a flood? We identify the flow of water across roads and properties. Filter is applied to remove depths of 150 millimetres or less, and an exception is for fast flowing water that is more than 100 millimetres deep. So slow moving water that is deeper than 150 millimetres or fast moving at depths more than 100 millimetres is identified as flooding. So what is council doing to mitigate or prevent flooding in these potential areas now that they have been identified? So the next stage of the state government flood policy is to prepare a floodplain risk management study. And in this study, flood affected and high priority areas identified, we will be looking at options to mitigate flooding, and we will be preparing an implementation plan for a long-term strategy for mitigation. So again, we can confirm that the notations related to the draft overland flood study have been removed from planning certificates as of Tuesday, and they will remain off until the flood study is finalised and adopted by council. If your property was already notated as flood affected by a previously adopted flood study, the notation will still remain on your planning certificate. Got a question here. Can the one-on-one sessions be remote? Yes, we can definitely organise that as part of the, if you register your interest through the wait list, we can organise online meetings as well. Okay. I think I've answered all the questions that I have been given. So BMT will be, the next steps is BMT will be consolidating all the submissions on behalf of council. As noted earlier, the community consultation period is open until the end of March next year, and there are various ways that you can provide your feedback: online, email, phone or letter, or in the one-on-one in-person sessions. So through this community consultation, we are wanting to raise awareness of the identified flood risks across the Shire. We are also advertising for expressions of interest for community representatives from Kurnell and Woronora River for the Floodplain Risk Management Committee. The Floodplain Risk Management Committee meets to discuss flood risk management and includes technical representatives from Department of Planning and Environment, New South Wales State Emergency Services, local community and council. So please express your interest through the Join Your Conversation page up until 23rd of November. Again, thank you to everyone who has tuned in tonight to the information session. The recording of this session will be available on council's website with the closed captions. Also, I am reminded that all the questions that we've had tonight and Tuesday night will be posted. All the ANTS Q&A will be posted on our website for you to to see. So please return back there. We'll get them up as soon as possible. So thanks for all your questions tonight, and thanks for tuning in.